Hey guys, it's Graham. What's crackin'? Over the last couple of years, without really setting out to do this, I found myself reading a lot of books about the history of 19th century North America. A lot of those books were Civil War books. I might have read one or two that dabbled with the Mexican-American War, but I've also been very interested in the westward expansion. And that interest brought me to this book that I'm going to throw right up here on Andrew Luck's jersey. Blood and Thunder by Hampton Sides. I first heard about this on Brett McKay's Art of Manliness podcast, where he was interviewing Mr. Sides, who was also interested in doing a history of the westward expansion, and found that in many of these events in the mid-1800s, Kit Carson happened to be there. And so he set out to kind of write a biography of Kit Carson, but only so much as it pertained to the westward expansion, the government growing, seizing extra territories, pushing different Indian tribes out, shoving them onto reservations, and all of that. Kit Carson was born in 1809, died in 1868. He's of particular interest to me because I grew up in Nevada, and our capital is, contrary to popular belief, not Las Vegas. It is Carson City, up in the north of the state, by Reno. And so wanting to know more about him, I've picked up some books about him here and there. But you really need to focus on his memoirs and the nonfiction, because if you type in an Amazon search, you're more than likely to come up with some of the pulp novels that were written about him at the time. And Hampton Sides addressed that in his book. Those pulp novels were very, very popular back east. They were also highly sensationalized and mostly bullcrap. In fact, he even shares an anecdote of when somebody met Kit Carson after these cheap dime pulp novels had been in circulation, novels where he was, rescuing Indian princesses and conquering savages, and, the whole Shanghai Nights thing where Owen Wilson was shooting a bullet into a cavern and it would ricochet and kill these zombies and stuff. It wasn't that bad, that egregious, we'll say, but they painted a very false picture, an overly heroic picture of who Kit Carson was, that he was 7 feet tall and could shoot lightning out of his eyes. He was a short dude. I think he said he was 5'7", 5'8". Coincidentally, that's about as tall as Ulysses Grant was. We will grant them honorary 6'1" status, but I digress. This man went up and met Kit Carson and said, "Oh, you're the real Kit Carson, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you're not the Kit Carson I'm looking for." And he walks off, and Kit Carson's like, "I don't think I'm ever going to meet the Kit Carson that you're looking for." He was, for all intents and purposes, just a soldier and an officer who, while he was in the service of the United States Army, went where he was told to and did what he was told to. He fought in the Mexican-American War. He then fought in the Civil War for the Union side. And then after that, he was involved in the two major Indian wars between the United States government and the Plains Indians, and then the United States government and the Navajo in the desert Southwest, in what is now New Mexico and Arizona. His legacy kind of depends on who you are, whether you've got a favorable opinion of him or not. The Shoshone Indians, I think at least his first and maybe his first two wives, because he was married 3 times, I believe he was widowed once and Indian divorced once. It wasn't really a formalized thing. It was just if you're living with a woman you're married to, or if you no longer are, then you're not. His first wife was Shoshone, and those are, you still see Shoshone names, and there's still Shoshone tribe remnants all in the larger Great Basin area in Nevada, Idaho, Oregon, even parts of Washington. My sister-in-law has a Shoshone name. I don't think she has a drop of Shoshone blood in her, but that's where my in-laws were living, was up there in Washington and in the Great Basin, and those names were very common. You'd see them all around, and so my mother-in-law and father-in-law just decided to name her after this Shoshone word. His first wife was Shoshone, and then I believe his third wife, who was with him until he died in 1868, was Mexican. He got along well with them. They were more than happy to bring him in as one of theirs. But then a couple of decades go by, and he gets in that conflict with the Navajo, and he was with the detachment of the U.S. Army that ultimately defeated the Navajo and put their survivors onto reservations and chopped down their peach orchards and I would assume that today the Navajo still do not have a very favorable impression of him because he was instrumental in their final defeat, at the hands of the U.S. government. So as far as his legacy goes, like in all things, it depends on who you ask. But I think that Hampton Sides did a very fair job of painting an objective picture and just telling the facts and doing what he could to dispel myth and rumor about the man, which was also an effort that Kit Carson undertook throughout his life. He wasn't literate. His penmanship was very poor. He didn't write much. He barely read. And so when he sat down to do his memoirs, as far as I understand, they were dictated. I have not yet read those memoirs, but I'm very interested in doing so. I was able to track down some articles online that were more substantive in their treatment of him and in their analysis of the man. But right now, if you want a good entry point into the life of Kit Carson, especially as it pertains to the westward expansion, I think you should check out Blood and Thunder by Hampton Sides. That's my recommendation for today. I think at the end of the day, I gave that book 4 stars. There were parts of it where it slowed down a little bit. Maybe Mr. Sides was focusing too much on details for my taste. Maybe I was just having a long day at work. So it goes with listening to audiobooks. Nevertheless, I heartily recommend it. I think you guys should check it out and that you'd like it. That's it for today. Drive safe. See you out there.